Everyone in EPC talks about being process driven, but the moment you ask a site engineer or a planning engineer to follow a process, they just ask one question: Sir, which step comes first? And that single question shows the truth. We don't have a process problem in EPC, we have a process mapping problem. Today, I'll show you how to develop EPC process maps at L2 and L3 levels, and which is not for audits, not for presentations, but for real execution on sites and in H4. This episode will completely change the way you look at process. Let us begin. Welcome back to EPC Sadhana and welcome to episode 6 of series 1, how to develop EPC process maps L2 and L3. We have discussed and understood importance of process excellence in our episode 1 of series 1, and then the need for shift in EPC mindset in episode 2 of series 1. We have covered components of robust process framework in our episode 3. Those are process, procedure, SOPs, workflow and RACI. And process grouping in episode 4. Those are core, support and management process groups. And we have covered process framework or hierarchy in our episode 5, that is L0 to L4. And this table summarizes all the components that we have learned in episode 3 to episode 5. From now on, we will be talking about these basics every now and then. If you have not yet watched these episodes, I recommend you watch them first. In most of the companies, you will hear we have defined processes. But when you open their process documents, you will find one of two things: either a one-page flowchart with boxes so generic that it means nothing, or a 20-page SOP written like a textbook with no visual clarity. And on site, nobody opens these documents. As a result, execution runs on experience or through verbal instructions or WhatsApp messages or lost project memory. And when something goes wrong, we say process was not followed. But the real issue is the process was never clear in the first place. So let us understand why EPC companies struggle with process maps. There are three core reasons. The first being no clarity between L1, L2, L3 and L4. Everything is called process. Strategy diagram, department workflows, SOPs, checklist, all are mixed up. And the reason too is process maps are drawn by quality teams, not the end user. Many maps are created sitting in H4. No site walkdowns, no execution inputs, no planning reality. As a result, map looks good but fails on ground. And the reason 3, no linkage between process maps and execution. What I mean, process maps are not linked to SOPs, work instructions, ERP workflows, KPIs. So they remain decorative diagrams. We have discussed the basics of L2 and L3 in our earlier episode of episode 5 of series 1. Before we go into the details of L2 and L3, let me make one thing very clear. A process map is not documentation, it is a thinking tool. So let us understand what is an EPC process map. A simple definition is, think of it as your project's GPS. It tells you where the process starts, who owns each step, what moves between departments, what inputs and outputs are generated, where approvals and handovers happen. A L2 map is process level, which is high level steps end to end, whereas L3 map is at activity level, that is detailed activities within each L2 step. Every L2 process map must include 7 key elements to make the process robust and practical. Let us understand each element in simple terms. The first element is define the process scope. How to do this? Ask these questions. What is the purpose of this process? Where does it start and where does it end? What's included and what's excluded? Example would be for procurement, your process may start from purchase requisition, approval and end at material delivery confirmation. Then the next element is inputs and outputs. That is step 2. So inputs are what you need to start that activity or step, like drawings, BOQ details, purchase requisition, specifications, etc. And outputs are what your customer, either internal or external, receives from this particular process. If you define both correctly, you will instantly spot handover gaps between departments. Then the next element is sequence the activities. Lay them down in order. Don't write SIs, just verbs and nouns like prepare purchase requisition, float RFQ, evaluate offers. This sequence is your operational reality, not just a theory. The next element is define roles clearly. That is, who prepares, who reviews, who approves, and who verifies. You may use a simple RACI chart. Once you do this, you'll stop hearing, I did not know it was my job, or who is the approver, or whom should I reach. The next element is add controls and checkpoints. Identify where things can go wrong, like late approvals, selecting a wrong vendor, incomplete drawings, and add these control points. This converts your process map into a risk control workflow, and these control points can be helpful in your internal audits or assessing your process. Then the next element is define how you will measure it. So every process should have KPIs and records. For example, procurement can track average lead time or procurement cost variance. These measures turn your process map into a management tool. The last and most important component is review and validate with stakeholders. Don't make process maps in isolation. Sit with people who actually do the work. By this, you will get both buy-in and accuracy. Let us take an example to understand what is L2 level process map. So material management is not one process, but it has stages like planning, indenting, procurement, delivery, storage, and then issue to site. So L2 shows the end-to-end flow across the departments. Think of L2 as the Google Map overview of the process. So let us understand what is L3 process map. So L3 is where execution clarity begins, and L3 answers how does each L2 block actually work. If L2 is the highway map, L3 is the street level navigation. Every L3 process must include all the components as we discussed under L2 process map, plus few additional details like in place of sequence of activities, here we need to capture detailed steps in L3, as L3 is about how it is executed, that is step by step, whereas L2 talks about what happens, that is end to end. And L3 level, you should have more detailed RACI and accountability details. And you can give reference to the forms, templates, checklists, those to be developed at L4 level that we will discuss later. Then you can also add system screenshots or ERP steps if applicable, and also do's and don'ts and notes. Let us take an example to understand what is L2 level process map. So material management is not one process, but it has stages like planning, indenting, procurement, delivery, storage, and then issue to site. So L2 shows the end-to-end flow across the departments. Think of L2 as the Google Map overview of the process. Let us understand what are the common mistakes in L2 and L3 mapping. Those needs to be avoided. That is turning L3 into SOP text, making process maps too complex, using different symbols without standard, ignoring exceptions because every process might have some exceptions, those needs to be captured, not updating the process maps after ERP changes. Remember one thing, a bad process map is worse than no process map. How L2 and L3 connect to L4? Let us understand this. This is where maturity shows. L2 gives the structure, L3 gives execution clarity, and whereas L4 documents operationalize it. If L3 is weak, SOPs will be weak. If L3 is unclear, RACI will fail. If L3 is missing, ERP workflow will collapse. Everything starts from good L2 and L3 maps. Processes don't fail because people don't follow them, but processes fail because people don't understand them. L2 gives everyone the same picture, L3 tells everyone what to do. When a company masters L2 and L3 mapping, confusion reduces, coordination improves, accountability becomes visible, SOPs become meaningful, and execution becomes predictable. This is the foundation of process excellence in EPC. This is EPC Sadhana. In next episode, we will see how to write EPC SOPs, work instructions and RACI matrices, that is L4 layer. Stay disciplined, stay process driven and stay tuned to EPC Sadhana with GK. See you soon in next episode of series 1.